What happens when a cop with a power complex meets a woman who outranks him in every way that truly matters? It began on a quiet Wednesday night in Toledo, Ohio, just after 11 p.m. The city had slipped into that peculiar hush between late and early, when streetlights hum and every tire on asphalt sounds like a confession. Shift workers drifted home. Dining rooms went dark. The wind moved empty wrappers along the curb like they were trying to escape. Lieutenant Colonel Adrienne Wallace drove north in her government-issued black SUV. The windows were modestly tinted, her mirrors clean, the interior immaculately kept. A car that looked like its driver, structured, unshowy, efficient. Adrienne's left hand rested at 12 o'clock, the right at 4. Her speed was steady, her lane work precise. She was humming under her breath, something low and simple, to keep herself awake after a late base meeting 2 hours south. She wasn't speeding. She wasn't drifting. She wasn't doing anything except going home. But 100 yards away, parked at an angle off Reynolds Road, Sergeant Daniel Mercer watched the world through a windshield speckled with dust and a pride he wore like armor. He was bored, sure, but more than that, he wanted to feel something. In his mind, the uniform made him the last line between order and chaos. The badge was gravity. Everything and everyone bent to it, especially at night. He set down his lukewarm coffee, thumbed his phone dark, and stared at the unfamiliar SUV gliding past like a shadow that refused to explain itself. Then he moved. Red and blue split the night. Adrienne glanced in the rearview mirror, blinked once, and eased to the shoulder. She flicked on the dome light as a courtesy and rolled the window halfway to keep out the cold. Both hands visible on the wheel. Calm, controlled. The way she had trained soldiers to be in worse situations than this. The patrol car door slammed. A tall figure approached, hand resting on his holstered weapon, flashlight in the other. He didn't come to the passenger side for safety. He went straight to her window and tilted the beam into her eyes. "License and registration," he said. "No greeting, no explanation." "Officer, may I ask why I'm being stopped?" Adrienne asked, voice even. "You were drifting between lanes and failed to signal." "Looked like you might be under the influence," he said, the light never leaving her face. "I wasn't," she answered just as even. "License, registration." He separated the words like they were a warning. She moved deliberately, right hand to the glove box, left hand fixed where he could see it, retrieve the paperwork, pass it up. "This is a government vehicle," she said. "I'm a federal employee." He smirked, barely, but it was there. "What is that supposed to mean? You think you're above the law because you're military?" "I never said that," she replied. His tone shifted. "Step out of the vehicle." "Excuse me?" "Step out of the vehicle." "I'm conducting a sobriety check." "On what grounds?" "I've complied. I haven't been drinking." Her jaw set, but her voice stayed calm. "You refusing a lawful order?" "No, I'm asking for clarification." The flashlight did not waver. Somewhere behind his eyes something flared. Ego, impatience, self-importance, faster than thought. He reached for the door handle and opened it himself. "I need you to exit the vehicle." Now Adrienne took out her phone, tapped the camera, and let the red dot glow between them. "For the record," she said, "this interaction is being documented." He glanced at the phone, a sliver of hesitation flickering, brief, brittle. Then he gestured at the shoulder. "Out!" She stepped onto the gravel, shoulders relaxed, chin level, stance grounded, not defiant, just present. The kind of presence that says, I'm not here to fight you, but I won't let you invent me either. He ran her through the motions like a script, heel to toe on the painted line, eyes on the tip of his pen, alphabet backward. Her focus never faltered. Her balance never broke. He knew it. She knew it. The street light knew it. Still, he wrote the ticket. Failure to maintain lane. She took the paper, no words, just a look that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite pity. Something steadier, sharper, almost surgical. She returned to her seat, signaled, merged, and disappeared into the curve of the road as if the night itself had accepted her. Mercer holstered his flashlight and told himself a story he liked to tell. Another stop. Another person reminded who decides how things go out here. He logged the citation at the station an hour later, tossed his body cam in its dock, and made a joke, something cheap, about a Fed with attitude. He did not watch the footage. 2 days passed before anyone else did. Toledo's West Side precinct had learned to walk around Mercer. He was useful, punctual, prolific with paperwork, decisive in the field, and the kind of sergeant whose voice stiffened spines in morning roll call. But usefulness has a shadow. People also knew he could be sharp, quick to escalate, too eager to teach lessons that weren't his to teach. Being feared is a kind of respect if you never test it. He bragged in the break room to Officer Diaz while a vending machine rattled. "Lady tried to flash a government ID at me," he said, tearing a bag of chips with his teeth. "Thought I'd salute, I guess." "What was her name?" Diaz asked, more careful than curious. Wallace, Adrian Wallace Diaz, stared a second too long. Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Wallace? She lectured at the academy last spring, runs logistics out of Fort Wayne. Bronze Star. 2 deployments. Mercer snorted like he was scoffing, but looked away like he wasn't. "On the road, I'm the authority," he said louder than necessary. By then the complaint had already left Adrian's outbox. Internal Affairs, the Inspector General, and, quietly, JAG Counsel. It included her phone video, a timeline, and 3 sentences that would turn a traffic stop into a mirror. She did not embellish. She did not dramatize. She documented. By the end of the week, a manila envelope with his name hit his desk. Notice to appear. The return address, Lucas County Civil Court. He read it standing next to his cruiser, sunlight bleaching the page. Plaintiff, Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Wallace. Claims, unlawful detainment, constitutional violation, abuse of authority. He laughed out loud because that was easier than blinking. When he went inside, Captain Reading shut the office door and twisted the blinds shut. "Dan," the captain said. "Sit." Mercer sat like the chair had moved under him. "It's a ticket." "She's making noise. She's also a combat-tested officer with an impeccable record," Redding said, "and she's got 2 angles of video, hers and your body cam. She followed orders. You escalated, I followed procedure." "You followed impulse," Redding said quietly. "You're going to court." For the first time, Mercer felt the badge go from shield to weight. Fort Wayne, Indiana. The next morning, Adrian stepped into her office, clicked the door shut, and let herself breathe for the first time since the stop. Not anger exactly, not fear. The feeling you get when a line you've stood on for years finally reveals itself to be a cliff. Her aide, Sergeant Daniels, hovered in the doorway. "You good, ma'am?" "No," she said, "but I'm handling it. I watched the footage. Legal is ready. Do you want this public?" "I don't want headlines," she said. "I want a record." He nodded and left her to it. She pressed play. watched the beam of his flashlight settle on her eyes like a hand that didn't ask permission, watched his palm ride the curve of his holster when her hands were empty and visible, watched her own posture hold, watched the field test, watched the paper slide across. She had led convoys on roads where every pothole could be a bomb, coordinated relief after hurricanes that threw trucks like toys, managed logistics for people whose lives were measured in both miles and minutes. She knew escalation when she saw it. She knew restraint when she felt it. She knew which one belonged to which uniform. She called Delaney Price, her attorney. "I'll see you in court," Adrian said. And for the first time since the blue lights lit up her rearview mirror, her heart rate slowed. The courthouse was old enough to remember other fights. It had stairwells that smelled like varnish and verdicts, thick wooden benches that had collected 100 years of nervous tapping. On the day of the hearing, the gallery filled quietly. Soldiers in dress uniforms, officers in plain suits, civilians with coffee cups they weren't supposed to bring inside. No cameras, no circus, just attention. Adrian walked in wearing her full-service uniform, not to intimidate, not to perform, because this was who she was. The insignia on her chest caught the light like a promise she'd kept. Mercer watched her take the stand. The smirk that had gotten him through most of his adult life stayed in his pocket. "Lieutenant Colonel Wallace," Judge Cynthia Morales said, "thank you for your service." "You may proceed," Delaney Price stood. "Lieutenant Colonel, please describe the night of January 17th. "I was driving home after a late base meeting," Adrian said. "I was pulled over without cause. I complied with every instruction. I remained respectful. The officer escalated needlessly. Were you impaired?" "No." "Did you identify yourself?" "Yes. I informed him I was a federal employee in a government vehicle. Did you refuse any lawful order?" "No." "Why did you record the stop?" "Because silence is not protection," Adrian said simply. "It's permission." Quiet settled deeper over the room. They played her video first. It was steady, clean, undeniable. The flashlight, the tone, the posture, then the body cam, the hand near the weapon like a punctuation mark that ended every sentence he spoke, the field test, the ticket, the dismissal like a door closing softly on dignity. Mercer's attorney, Charles Brenner, tried to thread the needle. "Isn't it possible, Lieutenant Colonel, that the officer was following protocol? Concerned for your safety and the safety of others?" "Concern," Adrian said. "Sounds different." "What do you mean?" "It asks questions," she said. "It doesn't accuse. Do you believe officers shouldn't have discretion?" "I believe discretion without discipline is intimidation." She looked at the jury. "A badge is not a free pass. It is a responsibility." Brenner's mouth tightened. He didn't ask that question again. Then Mercer took the stand. "Why did you ask her to exit the vehicle?" the prosecutor asked. "She looked evasive," he said. "Did she disobey any commands?" "No." "Did she threaten you? Raise her voice?" "No." "So why escalate? Silence?" "Sergeant Mercer, if you had known she was a lieutenant colonel, would you have acted differently?" He hesitated just long enough for the truth to pick the lock. "Probably," he said. The word hung there, not like an apology, like a confession. 3 days later, the verdict arrived. In the matter of Wallace versus Mercer, Judge Morales read, "The jury finds in favor of the plaintiff. The court recognizes a violation of constitutional rights during an unlawful stop and detainment and conduct inconsistent with department policy and professional standards. Damages awarded $35,000. The decision will be entered into permanent public record and forwarded to the Department of Justice and the Toledo Police Department for internal review and policy evaluation. No applause, no gasps, just consequence, plain as paper. Adrian nodded once and gathered her things. Mercer sat very still on the hard bench until everyone else had left. He stared at his hands like he didn't recognize what they were for anymore. The story spread, first in whispers, in roll call rooms where officers checked their nameplates twice, in base hallways where recruits walked a little straighter, in coffee shops where people talked about a woman who didn't raise her voice and still moved a mountain. Adrian refused interviews. She had operations to plan, supplies to route, soldiers to train. Leadership doesn't pause because a spotlight moves. But the ripples weren't hers to stop. At the precinct, Mercer went on administrative leave. Some said reassignment. Others said this was the beginning of the end. The union filed a statement about due process. The department issued one about accountability. None of it sounded like the old world where his shadow stretched farther than his mistakes. Officer Diaz knocked on his door with 2 cups of coffee and set one down. "You okay, Sarge?" Mercer stared at the steam as if it could show him a road back. "I did what I always do," he said. Diaz took a breath. Maybe that's the problem. Mercer didn't look up. 2 months later, Adrian stood in front of a classroom of new recruits. They were young, most of them, but not naive, not anymore. Their faces were open, their spines eager. They sat forward when she began. "How many of you believe a uniform automatically earns you respect?" she asked. A few hands went up, some slow, some confident. She nodded like a teacher who understands the math behind the wrong answer. "Respect," she said, "is not owed. It's proved over and over through choices you make when nobody is watching. The badge, the rank, the title, they are not shields, they are weights. If you cannot carry them with discipline, you don't deserve to carry them at all." She told them about the stop, only what mattered. The tone, the posture, the escalation without cause, the choice to document, the decision to file, the refusal to turn it into noise when it needed to be signal. "I could have yelled," she said. "I could have stayed silent." "I did neither. I documented, I reported, I told the truth. Because silence is comfort for the guilty. Courage is protection for the rest of us. The room was quiet in that particular way that means something has landed. Lead with character," she finished. "Serve with integrity. And never forget, you don't just represent a uniform. You represent everyone who wore it before you, and everyone who will wear it after." When she stepped down, there was no applause, just the sound of pens uncapping and a dozen hearts deciding the weight they were willing to carry. Mercer drove to the lake on a morning that felt like apology. The water was flat. Gulls stitched the sky in silent loops. He sat on the hood of his car and thought about the first time he'd put on a uniform. He'd been 19 and so sure of the line between wrong and right, between force and safety, between authority and respect. Somewhere along the way, the line had become a circle, and he'd been walking it so long he thought it was a road. He took his phone out, spent a long time finding the courage to open a blank message thread. He typed, erased, typed again. The words he finally sent were not perfect. They were, for once, careful. "Lieutenant Colonel Wallace, this is Sergeant Mercer. I watched the footage again. I'm starting to see what you saw. I can't fix what happened, but I can work on who I am when it does. If there's a training session where my mistake could be useful as an example, if you'll have me, I'll show up to answer the hard questions. S. Mercer. He put the phone away and didn't wait for a reply. Some things are not about the response. They're about the reaching. Back at Fort Wayne, Adrienne was reviewing route manifests when the notification blinked across her screen. She read the message twice, not looking for flattery or alibis, just evidence of movement. She typed 7 words. Thank you for the message. Show up. They met in a multi-purpose room with bad fluorescent lights and good intentions. A dozen recruits, a whiteboard with nothing on it yet, folding chairs in a circle because hierarchy wasn't invited. Mercer sat in uniform, not the way he used to wear it, like a crown, but like a jacket he was trying to grow back into. He introduced himself without his rank first. Then he talked about procedure, yes, but also about impulse, about pride, about how certainty can imitate courage and fool a life for years. Someone asked, "What would you do differently?" "Start with questions," he said. "End with respect." Another asked, "What if the person really is dangerous?" "Then discipline's the only thing keeping you and them alive," he said. "Discipline doesn't raise its voice." He glanced at Adrienne once in a while, not for rescue, but to make sure the floor he was standing on was the same one she'd held upright when he'd tried to tilt it. Afterward, a recruit lingered. "Ma'am," she said to Adrienne, "I joined because I believed in the idea of the badge. Today I learned I have to become the idea." Adrienne smiled, small but real. "That's the work," she said. Months later, Toledo moved at its ordinary pace again. Headlines found new fires to chase. The courthouse stairs cooled. The precinct coffee turned from fresh to burnt and back again. But in places you can't print, something had changed. A field officer paused before his hand found his holster. A rookie asked one more question before writing one more ticket. A supervisor reran a video and chose training over triumph. On a gray morning that turned golden just before noon, Adrienne parked outside a community center where she'd been asked to speak. Not about war, not about logistics, about leadership when nobody is watching. She walked through the double doors and was surprised to find the room already full. Students in hoodies, grandmothers in floral dresses, a mechanic with oil on his knuckles, a teacher still wearing her lanyard, a pastor with a notebook open, 2 uniformed officers in the back standing side by side without crossing their arms. She talked for 40 minutes. Not a single camera flashed. When she finished, a woman who had been silent the whole time raised her hand. "What do you do?" the woman asked, voice careful. "When you're tired of being the one who has to be calm." Adrienne breathed once before answering. "You rest," she said. "Then you stand again. And if you can't, you find someone who can stand next to you. Calm is not surrender, it's strategy, and you deserve help carrying it." The woman nodded, tears unfallen but present. The room exhaled a sound that might have been relief. Outside, cloud light softened the edges of everything. Adrienne leaned against the cool metal of her SUV and looked up. She thought about a flashlight in her eyes and a hand near a holster, about a verdict read in a room that smelled like wood and waiting, about recruits learning to become the idea, about a message that said, "I can't fix it, but I can work on me." She thought about the 7 words she had sent in reply. Thank you for the message. Show up. The work is never over, she knew. But sometimes it turns a corner. Sometimes the weight is shared. Sometimes the person you never expected to change starts to. Sometimes accountability doesn't roar, it knocks. And when you open the door, it looks a lot like Grace wearing boots. If this story moved you, even a little, take a moment right now to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to believe in accountability again, and subscribe to our channel. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what discipline with respect means to you. Because real strength doesn't come from power. It comes from integrity. And courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stands its ground and tells the truth. Stay tuned. More true. Human stories are on the way.